First phone call I make that night is to cyber insurance. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. Second call is to the FBI. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. And they were like, all right, we'll get someone on it. And then the third call was to my wife. And it was, hey, we've had a ransomware attack.
Can you walk us through the first 24 hours of how did you discover it? What were your initial thoughts, reactions, and what did you do?
As soon as I find the README file, I was like, this isn't good. This is bad. You have this sinking feeling in your stomach. So things like EDR and different alerts that we might have running on those servers didn't trip anything because the ransomware didn't trigger there.
Was there any attempts to be made to just go and restore the whole hypervisor from backup, or what was the approach to go and resolve this?
We ended up having to restore our Active Directory environment to an esports gaming machine. We have these high-end, like blazing fast gaming PCs in our esports lounge. So it was probably like the fastest Active Directory environment in the history of the world.
But what are you doing in the meantime? Is FBI helping you? Is insurance being useful? What else is happening in parallel?
It was probably 11 months to the day from our attack. They reached back out and said, hey, we have some decryption keys if you guys need them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Full Metal Packet. Today, we have a rare opportunity to sit down with someone who's lived through the exact scenario every CISO dreads. Please welcome Zachary Lewis, who's the CIO and CISO at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy in St. Louis. In April 2023, while he was in the middle of building a university security program, LockBit ransomware showed up and kind of ruined the party. Zach led the response, refused to pay the ransom, and later turned that painful experience into a book with a very long title, Locked Up Cybersecurity Threat Mitigation Lessons from a Real-World LockBit Ransomware Response. Zach, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm real happy to be here. It's a great opportunity.
What are you doing on this hopefully fine day today?
Everything's going well, as good as it can be. Things are moving. We're not being attacked by anybody right now, as far as I know. So we'll take it as a win.
As far as you know.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a question for you. Since you kind of wear multiple hats, CIO and CISO, do they ever come in conflict with each other?
Probably less so since it's all in one person. But if we're gonna have a budget conversation, I can usually delineate between what's most important. So I was a CIO before I was a CISO, so I think about what's best for the business always. We're doing digital transformation, we're bringing new tools, we're bringing new systems, but I get to always layer that with a level of security in mind. So how are we going to do it securely? I don't have to have a conversation with another person, another team to make sure that's happening. I just kind of make it the default. So I don't know. It works hand in hand for our organization here. Probably not for everybody, but we've found a nice equilibrium.
Do you ever have like an internal, monologue with while wearing the two hats, or does it all just kind of get blended in together?
At the beginning, yeah. Now it's kind of just old hat at this point. It just happens. I don't know. It's a reflex sort of. You've done it. I've been in this role for almost 7 years, and I just kind of know what I want to do and how I want it to happen. And the team's starting to figure that out as well and get comfortable with it. So we make it work.
So I guess I would just dive straight in. So if you were kind of like talking to a first-time CISO in higher ed or any kind of adjacent industry, what do they think that they underestimate about ransomware as it stands right now?
Yeah. I think we can look at statistics and show that ransomware continues to increase every year in terms of attacks, right? We see that rising anywhere from 13 to 20% year over year. We've not seen a dip in that. We've seen a dip in payments in the last few years. I think that's a testament to sort of our resilience and backups. We can talk more about that later, but we're no better at stopping attacks. So when I talk to other CISOs about it, it's like, hey, it's going to happen. We've heard it before. It's not if, but when. I hate to have to say that, but you're probably going to run into one sooner or later, right? So it's best to be prepared early, whether that's talking to your leadership team, even your own security and IT teams, educating the board and different stuff, and just sort of prepare. What does that look like for you? How's it likely to come in, and how's your team going to respond? We typically see phishing emails still being the top most used threat vector for higher ed, if not all organizations, with general social engineering coming right behind that. So we prepare in those areas as best as we can, really.
You kind of mentioned it's going to happen eventually. The ransomware has been around probably for more than 10, 15 years, I suppose. Why do you think it's still such a big thing, and why haven't organizations, I guess, improve their defenses?
Sure. I think a lot of that stuff is a lot of the security stuff, whether the defenses are foundational. And we sometimes miss those for a shiny new toy here or the latest buzzword over here, whether that's been, zero trust and cloud security and AI now. We get distracted by that when really it's good, strong password hygiene and MFA, doing some blocking and tackling on email, patching systems, not putting critical systems internet facing, just some basic stuff that we neglect, and it can be hard, especially if you have a huge organization. I think about a lot of people's patch remediation, and they might have, hey, we want 90% compliant. Well, if you have 1,000 systems, you still got 100 out there that are unpatched and could be vulnerable. So what's on though? Is that an attack vector? Can someone get in and escalate privileges or laterally move through systems? So really thinking about what that means, where those compliance levels lives, and some of those foundational training things that we've fallen off in the last few years. Ransomware, is still lucrative because it makes money. Last year it was about a $1.6 billion industry. I think that's fallen now into around the $850 million industry. So we've halved it. Again, going back to being able to recover and not pay ransoms, which is great, but still a very huge moneymaker industry. And if we're really bad at defending our systems, and threat actors can get in with a phishing email or a phone call, and they can exfiltrate data or get us to pay a couple $1 million for some data, then they're going to.
Yeah, it's very asymmetrical, right? It's such an asymmetric attack because it doesn't cost you much to execute the attack, but it can cost millions of dollars. I think in one of your articles you were quoting something like the average ransomware breach costs around $7 million in disruption.
Yeah, and that's counting the really big players too, the average, right? So well, and by far that average gets skewed. I think some of us medium and smaller players don't see that. Ours was only 1.5 million, but you get those, and it doesn't take them much. When we look at these attacks, they're not some secret 0 day that they've been setting on for years. It's not some unknown attack vector that no one's ever seen before. It's very simple. Typically, a phone call, a text message, an email. It's not a heavy lift.
Do you think that will change in terms of the initial attack vector, especially in this post AI world?
Sure. We've seen with AI that they've gotten more customized. The phishing emails, the text messages. We don't see the bad grammar anymore. We see very, very targeted stuff to specific people, the roles they're in, the companies they're at, with very specific information. So if they get in, they compromise one person, they get access to email, they might research 3 or 4 other people in the company. Oh, they had a conversation about going to Florida, or their dog's name is Max, or their kid's name is John. And when they customize those phishing emails with AI, they're working that stuff in. So it has almost this personal touch to it that makes people want to click them. We're going to see more of that. And then, with Mythos coming, and I don't want to belabor the AI point too much, but we're going to see I think a big screw of vulnerabilities that come out very quickly, very fast. We're going to have to patch very quickly and very fast, and some companies just aren't going to be able to keep up, and that's going to open up a whole lot of vulnerabilities for them in the near term anyway. In the long term, hopefully we get better and AI fixes all that stuff for us immediately, but we'll cross that bridge in a couple of years maybe.
Sounds good. So I guess maybe we'll just move on into kind of a topic that you probably discussed many times, which is the LockBit incident. I believe that was from a few years ago. So can you maybe walk us through the first 24 hours of how did you discover it? What were your initial thoughts and reactions, and what did you do first?
Yeah, absolutely. So we initially thought that we weren't having a ransomware attack. We did not think this was any sort of cyber attack. We thought we were having an IT issues. We had some end-of-life equipment that was really old. We were looking to replace it in the next couple of months, sort of waiting for that summertime lull when the students are gone and we have the opportunity to do some big projects and disrupt the network and everything. So, again, this is end-of-life equipment. We think, oh man, it's failed. It's shut down. Something went sideways on it. Now we'll go in, we'll troubleshoot, we'll get it back up. And we actually did.
But how did you know? That you get like some kind of alarm or some alert was issued? Or
Yeah, I actually got a phone call from one of my team members pretty early on April 13th. I remember the date, saying that some on-site systems were unavailable. So we're a very SaaS first organization. So a lot of our critical applications are SaaS based and distributed out in the cloud. That's where most of our students go to do their courses, upload their homework, and do anything they have to do academically. So on-site systems and services really affects the IT team, the operations team, things like building automation, facilities, different sorts of stuff like that. And it's unavailable. So we kind of start troubleshooting, looking at that, again, thinking it's hardware failure. It wasn't until a couple days into that troubleshooting that we actually found the ransom note. The ransomware note ended up being in the root of our hypervisor. And for those that don't know what that is, that's the system that runs our virtual servers. It's a piece of hardware, and at the root of it, in the very sort of, we'll call it in the back of the system, for those that aren't aware, we find this note, and it's a README file. And when I open it, as soon as I find the README file, I was like, this isn't good. Like, this is bad. You have this sinking feeling in your stomach. You're like, this shouldn't be there. You're seeing all these other files, and their extensions are sort of weird looking. It doesn't quite make sense. And you just sort of know before you open it what you're going to run into, and you get a little sick feeling. But I opened that note. I had my network director over. He sees it too, and it's just like, shit, that's not good. That's really bad. So we find that note, and it's from LockBit saying that they've stolen some of our data and they've ransomwared our systems. And they had, from the root of that hypervisor, they had encrypted all the files on the hypervisor. So not individually on each server was ransomware run, but at the top level it was ran. So things like EDR and different alerts that we might have running on those servers didn't trip anything because the ransomware didn't trigger there. So we didn't get an alert that ransomware was running through the environment, because there's nothing that you can really run on that hypervisor level that watches for that, right? So we were kind of just hosed, and we immediately stopped all sorts of disaster recovery, troubleshooting that we were doing, because now things are different. This isn't a disaster recovery or an IT incident. This is a cyber incident, and we have a whole different playbook for that. As soon as that happened, so we stopped troubleshooting. I go down. My boss is the COO. I go to him and I say, hey, this is what's going on. I need you to like muster up the leadership team. We're going to have a debrief real quick, and some things are going to happen in pretty quick order. He's like, all right, I'll get the team together. We've worked together for a very long time, so he knows I don't come to him very often with a major problem like this. It was pretty serious. I have an incident response plan in my office. We get that out, and it's like, go through, like, this has been written. We've never had to really use it. And it's like, first step, call cyber insurance. First phone call I make that night is to cyber insurance. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. And they're like, yes, we'll muster some stuff. We'll have a call tomorrow. That's cool. Second call is to the FBI. Hey, we've had a ransomware attack. I'm going to need some help. And they were like, all right, we'll get someone on it. And then the third call was to my wife, and it was, hey, we've had a ransomware attack. This might be a resume generating event. I'm going to be a little late tonight. Maybe don't go out and like buy anything crazy for a little bit, so we figure out how this kind of shakes out. So that was kind of like the first day. We get the leadership team together. I give them an update of what's going on. General counsel is there. Our president's there, and different people. They're going to give a quick update to our board chair, and then me and a couple people in the office end up staying here most of the night. As we start, we're just assessing what's going on. You know, our hardware is all down. We can't reboot it. Where are our backups at? Can we get to backups? Do we have any hardware we can put these backups on? What's the next step? So going into the next morning, we're still in this 24-hour cycle. The next morning, we get on the call with cyber insurance, and they've brought in forensics investigators, they've brought in threat negotiators, they've brought in remediation specialists, and then their own outside counsel who specializes in ransomware attacks, cyber attacks. And we kind of just start debriefing. There's logs people want to pull, there's software we want to put on systems. We're just trying to assess kind of how far everything's gone. We need to set up outside communication, because the threat actors could still be in our systems. They could have access to our emails, our chats, and we don't want to know what's going on. So we need to set up out-of-band communication on how we're all going to communicate and pass information back and forth. And that's kind of first steps. I'll note the ransom note itself says specifically to not contact insurance and not contact the FBI and not contact pretty much everybody. And they give a whole list of reasons justifying why you shouldn't do that. That's beneficial for us and for them, and not for anyone else. They actually told me to find a philanthropist that like loves our company, like Elon Musk is who they suggested, that I should reach out to him and see if he would pay our ransom. Just keep things quiet, just get the ball rolling. He did not respond to any of my tweets, so I guess he wasn't interested at the time. So that's kind of the first 24 hours, right?
Okay. Yeah, why not go straight to the source, that pays out all the
Right.
money, and just ransom Musk directly if he's going to be paying your bills anyway.
That'd be great. Yeah.
Okay. And if I may ask, like, what kind of systems ultimately were like disrupted? Like at this point, it's a university. There's a lot of stuff. What's the impact to students and faculty?
Yeah. So at the time this happens, our students and faculty don't actually know anything's going on. So they're, again, it's cloud systems, pretty distributed. They're able to log in and they're doing coursework and stuff. What they don't know is on the back end, we're unable to, so Active Directory is down, so we're unable to create new accounts. We can't change any passwords. Fortunately, like their credentials are sort of synced out to Microsoft's Intra ID, which is cloud-based. So that's going to work. But we have this hybrid connector, and we can't change passwords now on-prem because they replicate out to the cloud. So they're stuck with what they have. Nothing's going to change there. But they don't know that, and that's okay. But we're not creating new users. We don't have no control over building automation. So HVAC systems, fire panels, anything that talks back to air handlers, water control, like temperature, all that stuff is handled in building automation. It's down. Security systems are down, cameras, door access, badge access. We can't create new badges. We can't issue new cards or anything. A lot of those settings are fortunately stored locally on the card for in case there's a power outage or something, but no changes are going to be made. Nothing's going to be added or tweaked. Bunch of back-end IT databases and systems, anything that was still on-prem. So we were just on the tail end of moving all of our department shares and personal shares out to OneDrive and SharePoint. So on-premise file shares that were still there were unavailable. But fortunately, most people were using them out in the cloud. Handful of, like I said, databases and different stuff like that. We have some financial aid resources that were on site that were unavailable. So just a little bit of everything, enough to cause a little bit of chaos and panic around what we were able to do.
So what, you mentioned the playbook is cyber incident and not disaster recovery. But you also kind of mentioned before that the reason we got better at handling these things is like restoring from backups, which is very similar to disaster recovery. Sure. You said that it happened on the hypervisor, which is like at the root of all the systems, right? That's what like provisions the resources for all these different backend services, right?
Yeah.
So was there any attempts to be made to just go and restore the whole hypervisor from backup, or what was the approach to go and resolve this?
Yeah. So again, in an incident, you don't want to restore, restart, wipe any systems. So this hypervisor that has these encrypted files on it, it has sort of the logs, the trail of evidence, if you will, of what the threat actors touched. And that's going to give us a clue as to how they got in, where they went, what they took. And you don't want to touch that. Reboots can kind of fry that data, and you don't want to write over it. So what we needed to do if we were going to restore from backup is find different systems to restore to. We had a couple key issues that we ran into at the very beginning. One of the things, we were still waiting on hardware because I mentioned the hardware was end of life that we had. We needed new stuff. And the problem was we're coming right out of COVID. And if anyone remembers during COVID, supply chain was severely disrupted. So we were having long wait times for firewalls and switches and servers. So we're still in that waiting period right now. We've had stuff on order for several months coming out with supply chain issues. They were getting delayed. So it's like, oh man, what are we gonna put this stuff on? We can't overwrite the current system because we need it for forensics, and we don't have anything new to put it on. And minus some other issues that we can probably talk about in a minute, we ended up having to restore our Active Directory environment to an esports gaming machine. Like we have these high-end, like blazing fast gaming PCs in our esports lounge. So it was probably like the fastest Active Directory environment in the history of the world. But that's the only thing we had available to it. So we like stacked it on some blocks in the data center and did a restore to it to get Active Directory function again, so we could get authentication going and people logging in and password changings and different stuff like that. But we definitely ran into some more issues before that, but that was kind of like how we had to pivot while we waited for that hardware to show up. And it was It was a few extra weeks after that point before the hardware actually got here. We were able to pop it in and start recovering to it and get all of our systems back up and work.
Is it still running on that gaming PC?
No, it is not. No, definitely not.
Okay. So I guess while all that's happening, you can't really do anything to the machine that's running. You don't have any new hardware. Yes, you have this gaming PC that you move stuff to, but what are you doing in the meantime? Is FBI helping you? Is insurance being useful? What else is happening in parallel?
Yeah, so several things go on right there. FBI reaches out, and they, FBI is not going to put hands on keyboard. They're not going to do any work. They're not going to help you recover. They're solely interested in getting information about the threat actor. So from us, they needed to know indicators of compromise, how they got into our systems. They wanted the ransom note. How are they communicating with you? Any emails, any dark websites, onion sites, whatever on the tour, give those to them. Just anything that can help them identify who the threat actors were. And they definitely wanted to know if we were going to pay any money to them, because if there's Bitcoin wallets, and they're actually pretty good at getting the crypto, the Bitcoin, whatever it is, back before the threat actors can get it. They have some experience with that. About an 84% success rate, so pretty good overall. So I'm working with them, giving them all the information we can get. I'll note it was probably 11 months to the day from our attack. They reached back out and said, "Hey, we have some decryption keys if you guys need them now." And I was like, "Man, if I still needed decryption keys 11 months later, that'd be pretty bad." But they'd managed to take down LockBit the month before and had acquired a bunch of those keys. And I don't think our specific incident and the evidence I gave them cracked the case open, but it definitely, I think, helped in that case. So that's why we still contact them and work with them, because anyone who was compromised, a week, 2 weeks, a month before they actually took down their site, got those decryption keys, and probably saved their butts big time. So still good to work with them. In the meantime, cyber insurance. So we have threat negotiators. So we establish communication with LockBit. They're fortunate enough to have a really good customer support site.
How do you communicate with them? Just through like a Tor website?
Yeah, they leave their Tor URL in the ransom node. We connect to it through the Tor browser. It's a forum site. It's a chat. We have a unique identifier key that they left for us in the ransom note. We put that key in. It identifies who we are, and so they know who they're talking with. They jump on. They're like, "Oh, hey, great to see you. We have this amount." We have originally they said they had 75 gigs of data that jumped up to 180, and then eventually jumped up to like 380 gigs. So they kept increasing it throughout, saying they had gotten more and more from us. But they were like, "Hey, we have this much amount of your data, and it's going to cost you $1.25 million to get it back. That's we'll decrypt it for you. If we'll give you the decryption keys, you can open that up, you can have your data back, and we'll call it good." So working with the threat negotiators, we try to play into, hey, we don't know a lot, but this is a new situation for us. How do we know we actually have this data? Can you give us some file listings? And we're just trying to establish what files do they have, and all we're able to get is a file listing with the names of the files. So from that, and being that our environment's sort of encrypted, we're trying to square, based on the names of files, do we think this stuff is sensitive? What types of files could be in, what types of data could be in these files? So that was like the first, after that conversation, the next week, 2 weeks is just reading through these files, and they gave us a list of a few hundred. They said that's 5% of everything they had, and they weren't going to give us any more file information. Like, that's all you get. You have to make a determination from there. So we're like passing this around to people, different internal departments. Not a lot of people know, but the people that do know, we're like, "Hey, do you recognize any of this? Do you recognize any of this? Do you think this is sensitive?" And just trying to figure out what's going on there. At the same time, the forensics teams are running. They have some software they're running on our systems that are still operational. So our cloud environment is still operational. They're running scans up there to make sure nothing's compromised in these areas. We're trying to scan to see if the threat actor is still in the environment. They're getting logs from our SIM and pulling all that together, and we're trying to just piece together what happened. Where did they go? How did they get here? We kind of know some of the systems they've hit based on the file pass that they've given us for these files. So we know these were accessed at certain times, and we're just trying to coordinate that to a specific account and then follow that back through the logs to see what happened. That's kind of the main piece. And then we're also looking at remediation. So again, when's our hardware getting here? Can we restore? I'll note at this point so we're looking at backups at this point. We're like, all right, where's our backups at? And we find that the secondary backup location has been completely wiped out. The threat actors went in, found it, and they deleted it. So secondary's gone. We find our primary. It's available, and what sucks about it is I mentioned Active Directory being unavailable. Well, Active Directory is how you authenticate into a system. Primary backup has Active Directory authentication. It's down, so we can't get in. Okay, that sucks. We'll go to our local password. We have a local username and password that we keep on that system. All right, does anyone know what the password is to this? Yeah, it's in the password manager. All right, where's the password manager? It's on a server that's also encrypted. So we can't get to the password manager that has our super long, complicated passwords that no one can remember. So our primary is kind of hosed up too, and it sucks at that point. Like, you're already kind of beat down, but when you know your backups are like right there and that's your primary method to recover, and you just can't get to them because you don't know what your password is, like, really sucks. Just so bad. We end up having a tertiary backup site that's kept off-site, off network, off domain, and doesn't use any of our credentials that are domain joined, and it's out in the cloud. So we go out to it. Naturally, the password for it is in our password manager, still not available. But just by happenstance, and I mean this saved us right here. This saved us in a bad incident. Is one of the team actually had kept the password to that in their own personal password manager. Like, they had logged into it in a browser and hit save, and it just happened to be in their personal password manager, and they logged in, and we were like, wow, the only time like a breach of policy and procedure has ever saved us is this moment right here. And from there, we were able to restore. That's where we pulled our Active Directory backup from and stuck it on that gaming machine, which changed the whole scope of our recovery and definitely saved pretty much everything.
Well, I mean, if it's in a cloud environment, you could also, reach out to the vendor and be like, hey, this happened.
Yeah.
Here's my ID or something.
Yeah, the
That would help you
backup
out.
software wasn't. It was an on-prem solution that ran locally. So, without it, that would have been no dice. But hopefully Backblaze would have, maybe helped. We'll see. We didn't have to get that far. That was who our cloud backup was at the time. So, but anyway, we got in and it was okay.
Is it at this point that you decided, I think like you mentioned, that you decided not to pay the ransom, right? Which I think a lot of companies or organizations actually pay the ransom just to get back up and running really, really quickly. So was that before or after you found the pattern?
Yeah, so our stance on it's funny. We had run a tabletop in December of 2022, and our stance at that point in time was not pay the ransom. Right? I don't want to ever have to pay the ransom to bad guys. The president agreed he didn't want to pay a ransom to bad guys, and everyone can say, "Hey, I don't want to pay the ransom," until you get in a situation and you're like, "Man, they have a lot of our really sensitive data, or we can't recover from backup. We might want to pay that ransom so we can stay operational." So it's a very much situational decision. It's a very much a business decision and a team decision. Things you got to think through and worry about. A side of it I didn't know at the time was, your ransom might be $1 million, and there's no way you're going to pay that. But maybe the threat negotiators come in and they work down, and maybe it's like, well, hey, we got it down to $25,000. $25,000 good enough to pay to get operational quickly and get decrypted? Like, that might be something a business decides to do. So there's a lot of factors that go into it. I've learned a lot about it over the last few years, but we were of the mind not to pay. As soon as we were able to restore from Active Directory, we were definitely in the field of we're not going to pay. Unless, while going through all those files, some of those end up being just like the end-all be-all of critical sensitive information. So we're a university. We have student data. We have employee information. We also are a research university, so we have research data. And looking at, like, is this proprietary? Is this some new, medicinal formula or vaccine? Is it all of the current students, privacy information that we have? Is it patient data that we have from students being on rotation? Like, a lot of factors go into that would have maybe changed that play. 70 gigs, 170 gigs, whatever amount of HIPAA data release could be quite a few 100,000 or million files, and that's be some hefty findings. So you might look at like paying like that. But those are things that kind of went into our play. So we recovered our Active Directory. A little bit after that, we're still talking to the threat negotiators, and they start to realize, because enough time's gone by, that we're probably recovering. So they even mention in chat that, hey, you guys have probably recovered by now. Great on you. We still have your data. How about we lower that ransom cost down, and we'll only charge you $750,000 to not post the data we have. That seemed like a good deal to you guys. So, they start changing their negotiation tactics, knowing kind of how we're reacting.
I mean, that's really good customer support, to be honest. It's better than most customer support I've ever dealt with.
It's actually known, like they really do. Like if you decide to, and it's weird though, we're giving them some praise in this, but like if you buy a decryption key and you have problems, you can go to them and be like, hey, I can't get this decryption key to work. And they will like work with your team and like walk you through it and help you out. And that's because they want to be shown as being, upfront and friendly and helpful when you do this, because if they're not, and they just take your money and they're not, people won't pay them, and they want to be paid. So they're going to give you the decryption key if you pay. They're going to help you get through it, because the next person, they want them to pay them money too. It's this weird business, and they have KPIs, and some of them have even like insurance and quotas and buildings they work out of. Like there's a whole system out there in a lot of places that these guys work out of. And Alex, you mentioned something about a lot of companies wanting to pay immediately, and I wanted to hit on that. While we're a university, we're a health university, and a lot of healthcare institutions take a very different standpoint than we do. And like a lot of hospitals' first reaction is pay the ransom. That is what they do, because their first and primary care is to the patient. And if the longer they're down, a patient could die, and they've actually seen patients die from ransomware attacks. So when a hospital is encrypted, they immediately pay the ransom to get decrypted. And that's why I think hospitals, healthcare has jumped to like the number one attack vertical, because these threat actors are like, we're definitely going to get paid if we go after them. That sucks. I don't know how you square that. I've had different talks with lawmakers in Washington and different groups around, does the United States make ransomware illegal? And it's like, well, that's gonna, we can't pay it anymore. You're going to start probably a black market of paying and keeping things secret. Eventually, that'll probably keep the threat actors from doing ransomware, because they're not getting as much money. But there's going to be definitely a period of pain there, where if you can't pay the ransom, a lot of places are going to struggle to get their data back, to get operational again. Going to have a real hard time there. Another conversation point was, does the United States label ransomware groups as terrorists? And you're like, that's interesting. That would give the United States the ability to go after them with the full force of the American government and military and cyber command and whatever. But if you look at your insurance policies, almost all of them say acts of terror are outside the scope of the insurance agreement. Okay, well then no one's getting any insurance money. So how you're not going to recover. You're not going to get these assets. Again, another period of pain that probably wouldn't be very good. So there's a lot more that goes into it. I don't think there's an exact easy fix out there than maybe just getting better at defense, but it's hard. It's a hard place to be in.
Yeah, and even if you pay the ransom, I mean, they do have a copy of your data, and at that point, you just have to trust them not to leak it after, even if you get the decryption keys. Like they have all that data, and there's no reason for them to delete it.
Yeah, right? Definitely gonna.
So it is an IOU. Yeah, trust us, bro.
Bad guys. Yeah.
Not a great position to be in. But honestly, while all of this is happening, and you're restoring your backups, have you how did you find out where they got in, and how can you be certain that they're still not in? And once you restore your backup on your gaming PC or whatever, that it's not going to get encrypted the next hour, for example.
Yeah, so this is where the forensics teams come in, and we're going through logs. We managed to pinpoint an account that accessed a lot of the files in question that were stolen and encrypted that they say they've exfiltrated. So we end up following this account back almost 2 weeks, all the way back to April 1st, right? April Fools. I guess that was me in this instance. But we followed all the way back to there as the initial sort of entry point into our environment. And it looks like at that point, it gets a little murky, but we can make some assumptions. And the assumptions that we make are that we're pretty sure that this account was compromised from one of our users' personal devices, likely a laptop. And we think that they clicked probably a phishing email. They submitted some credentials, and those credentials matched up with their work credentials. And at that point, the threat actor has these credentials, and they came in over the VPN. They VPN'd on that person's either their computer, or they set up a different computer that looked like it was coming from the States via another VPN. But they connected to our VPN with these credentials, came into our environment, and from there they just started poking around. What does this account have access to? What can it do? And they bounced from a couple different file shares they had access to, and somewhere in there they found another set of credentials that had higher level permissions. We actually think these account permissions were cached on the machine. They took these cached credentials and they were able to get higher and higher. During the negotiation with the threat actors, they actually sent us a list of accounts that they had compromised with username and passwords, and we're looking at them, and some of them are very escalated accounts with permissions. And you're like, oh, wow, they really found some really good, yep, they can get to pretty much everything with those. And so they used those to hop from server to server till they got to the hypervisor. They found the hypervisor, and that's where they started really poking around, because then they had access to pretty much everything in the environment that was at least on-prem from the hypervisor level. They found the secondary backups and deleted those. They did create, we saw from the logging, because we have logging on our Active Directory environment, that they created backdoor accounts for them in Active Directory. They changed a handful of passwords we had, and they created some new accounts. So we looked at the dates those were created. We knew they entered on April 1st. That was at least our best guess. So when we restored Active Directory, we went back to like March 1st. We were going to lose some data of things that were created between there and then, and password creations and different stuff, but whatever, it didn't matter. We wanted to go back far enough that we knew with a reasonable amount of certainty that they weren't in the environment. That restoration got rid of all those accounts they created. We had to stand up a couple other Active Directories after that and get the sync going again. There's a golden ticket in there for a lot of people that don't know, something to think about. And I talk about in the book, there's a golden ticket in your Active Directory environment that kind of controls how passwords are stored. We'll say that to make it easy, but you have to reset those a couple times. There's a whole process into it that we kind of had to look into and get done appropriately. But it's kind of where we're at and how we squared some of those things. At that point, we felt pretty good that they weren't in the environment anymore. We could start doing some more stuff in our normal chat, normal email, and not so much out of band. And we kept working for remediation from there.
But how can you be ultimately, certain that the restore from backup, the accounts they created were nuked, the initial compromised account, let's say, was nuked as well, everything that you're aware of is deleted. But how do you know there's no, processes running on random servers that will go and do something that haven't left something behind somewhere else?
Yeah.
Like, how do you have that assurance?
Yeah.
Ultimately?
So on the servers that were still stood up running in the cloud, we worked with the remediation teams, and we had some software. I'm not going to go into what the software was, but we put some software on there that kind of watched any sort of processes, communications going in and out, things that were running, communications that were happening. We monitored those pretty much from the first time we met until we kind of buttoned up the case to make sure there wasn't anything crazy or weird happening there. So we're watching those. And then as far as the other servers that were on-prem, some of those got restored just so we could get configs and do different stuff with them that we needed for different restorations. But when the new hardware came in, almost everything in the environment got rebuilt from scratch. And we brought in different companies that kind of house that software to help us rebuild those things. It was a great time to update a lot of systems and get things put on the latest version, because when we got new hardware, it was like, all right, we have these configurations. We pulled these down from, and not so much like accounts that were on those hardware, but specific database configs or setting configs from different systems. So unlikely that those are going to have anything in it that let the threat actor in, because they're more like config files, and they get checked and they're from pretty far back. But we applied those to our new systems to get them sort of configured right and working appropriately once we rebuilt them. We felt pretty good about that. We ran the same software on the new rebuilt systems that the cloud systems had, just to see if anything was acting weird as they got built. We weren't seeing anything Our MSSPs aren't seeing anything. The group that the insurance team brought in is not seeing anything. So after a month or so of that running, we felt pretty good. We had scrubbed it out of the environment. But typically, raise it, burn it to the ground, and rebuild it is your best path if, on some of that stuff.
I have a follow-up question for because, like you mentioned earlier, that because it was on the hypervisor, that the EDR, which you mentioned, you said there was an EDR that couldn't detect anything. But if the entry path was through like phishing through some account, and then it like escalated, and that those accounts are like poking around, doing all sorts of weird stuff to try and get escalate privileges. Why do you think the EDR did not catch that?
So again, I think the initial attack, that's why we think it was a personal device, and nothing tripped on the EDR because the personal device didn't have it, but they were accessing. I don't know if they clicked on something in their personal email on their personal device, or if it was actually hit their work email and it was on a personal device. But that's why we think it was a personal device, because nothing tripped on them. When they came through the VPN, they were accessing systems they were okay to access. They were greenlit to access and had the proper access control to do from that account. EDR not tripping on that either, because this is just, hey, they're going out to the file share. Hey, they're trying to get to this path that they're allowed to get to, or whatever. And then, again, somewhere in there, they found, cache credentials, and those credentials had higher level permissions. I can't say for sure, what the EDR was looking at or doing, but that account had elevated permissions to hit these other systems. So I guess it didn't trip because it was like, it's supposed to be here. It's not doing anything super weird. We do wonder why nothing tripped on the exfiltration of data, or how they moved it. It must have been, and part of that is probably because of the amount of data, which we haven't gotten to yet, but I'll fast forward to there. When the threat actor ends up dropping our data on the dark web, which they do because we don't pay the ransom, it ends up being just a little over 2 gigs of data. So it's not 175, not 380, just 2 gigs, a little over 2 gigs. So the thought is that they didn't move enough data at one time in a large enough quantity for it to trip the EDR. It was small enough that it just went under the radar. And I mean, to be fair, these guys, these threat actors, they know how these EDRs work. I'm not saying they know how to, every one of them knows how to shut one off, but it's becoming more and more common for them to, once they get into a system, to be able to run a command or initiate a script or do something that actually sort of disables these EDRs or makes their activity look benign. That didn't happen in this instance, but that is something that is known to happen. I just think they know how they operate, they know how they alert on, and they're able to keep their movements relatively quiet. And at this point in time, BitLocker had never had a member caught, had ever been stopped, had ever been anyone arrested. No one knew how they operated other than they were like out of Russia and they were ransomware as a service. So they were like the guys. They were the most prolific group at the time and probably the most knowledgeable. So they really knew their trade craft, really.
And when you mentioned, like, when you were talking to them and said, hey, we have this much data, and now we have more, and now we have more. I think like most people's knee-jerk reaction, especially if we have an on-prem system that's sitting in front of you, is to unplug the network cable or SPF port and take it offline to prevent further exfil. Why didn't you do that? What prevented you from doing that?
We did do that for the hypervisor hardware that was down. We did pull that cord. That happened very early on. And then we left the systems up, just not connected to the network. And then we had a sort of a laptop that we turned into a jump box for the forensic guys to get into, and then we would console them directly into that for forensic work and running. But we did, network cable. That's in our incident response plan as one of the first things to do. We just didn't touch on it earlier. a lot of stuff to get through. That's why you have an incident response plan, because you can't remember it all in your head. You put it all in a list of steps.
Well, speaking of that plan, how you, in hindsight, after the event, how useful was that plan?
In the first couple of days, I would say it was very useful. And I think that's how most incident response plans are. Like it's hard to plan for every type of incident that you're going to run into in every flavor. But I think at least the first initial steps can all be pretty standardized and it can be useful. So ours has who we're going to communicate with on the team, what's everyone's phone numbers and email addresses in case we need to get a hold of you. It has our MSP partners, our MSP partners. It has a list of all of our vendors, our contacts, their phone numbers. It has our insurance policy and who to call there and the steps to perform for cyber insurance. It has, hey, contact IC3 and do a report so the FBI and CISA get involved. It has all these different steps that we take in those first initial hours and what we're supposed to do. It has a list of all of our systems, what has critical data on them. The order stuff has to be brought back up if we're recovering from backup. So a little bit of like DR stuff is in there in case we need it, but just all sorts of steps. And then we have a handful of scenarios. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this, et cetera, et cetera. Again, not going to work in every instance. Every situation is a little bit different, but we have that as a resource because in those first few hours is usually the most stressful because you're seeing the note. You've probably already been trying to recover or get systems working. You're getting tired. And you're gonna be frazzled. You just are. So having a document to look at that says like step 1, do this, step 2, do this is super helpful. And that's what you just go and do. And then as things pivot further from that, you make some notes. You can update it and make it a little better as you go next time. But at least gives you a starting point. So after our incident, we went back to it and we were like, all right, we're going to add. And this is counterintuitive to a lot of people's thought process, but we added a couple physical passwords to it. We didn't want to be in a situation again where we didn't know the local password to our backup recovery software. So there's a hard copy of our incident response plan now that has that password in it. It's locked in a safe in a different part of the building. Only a couple people have access to, so I'm not super worried about it going missing or something happening with it. But we weighed out the risk and thought it was better to have that along with some other stuff in it that we didn't have the first time. So if that same situation were to ever happen again, we squared it. We're going to be fixed on that, among some other stuff. But that was one of the primary changes we made.
Did you have any kind of initial assumptions in the first few hours or even days, I guess, that were counterintuitive? And if you had to kind of go through this very fun experience once again, what things do you wish you would have, I guess, done differently or assumed differently?
Yeah, I don't know if any of my initial decisions were questioned. There was stuff that came out during forensics that goes back to how we did configurations of some of our systems, and I think a lot of that was due to us being. I'm not trying to make excuses. We were a small team. We have a lot of projects going on. We're trying to make things work. So there were configurations that got missed at different points. And it's interesting how 3 or 4 things can line up at just the right time. And a threat actor can find that and get in. Whereas if any one of those didn't happen, the whole kill chain would have been broken. They wouldn't have gotten in and nothing happened. So it's interesting looking back and seeing how they got in. From personal device through VPN and we had a misconfiguration I talk about in the book in there, just from rushing through systems and not doing a sort of a deep dive and a check of our configs and making sure everything was there. But all of this stuff just sort of lined up at just the right time in a right window. And this window was probably only open for 2, 3, 4 weeks is about the max of time that it would have been open. And the threat actor manages to find that and come through and unload their payload, which is pretty crazy to think about and how efficient they are and how quick they are at going about and doing some of this stuff. And that was before AI, right? So how does that change in the future? I guess we'll find out.
Oh, yeah.
We were just talking to another guest recently who basically said the same thing because they were doing cybersecurity for the military. And they said, everything is taken in the military as even outside of cybersecurity that it's all a chain of events. There's never an event that happens. If pilot crashes or someone gets hurt on duty or something like that, it's never just an event. It's always a series or a chain of events that led to the outcome. And you always have to look at it as what is the series of events that led to this occurring, right? So it sounds like you kind of learned that lesson also the hard way.
Yeah.
That there was a series of events that led to that. That's cool. Is there anything you would do? Well, obviously, I think one thing you mentioned, you now have hard, physical passwords. What are some things that you're doing now differently or would do differently to make sure something like this doesn't happen again?
Yeah, so we really look at where our main attacks are going to come from, but then also where our main weaknesses are. I mentioned we're very SaaS first. So how do our SaaS applications like all authenticate? I think we're entering a realm of where identity and data governance are like two super important pillars, right? So we don't want to be in a situation again where we don't know what data the threat actor has if a threat actor gets in. That was one of the issues for us was, we're looking at file names trying to determine if sensitive data is in there. So we brought on a system, and now we're doing a big data governance. We've been on one journey for like 2-3 years now, just around labeling data, classifying data, categorizing data, and really just getting an idea of where everything is, what's in it, what type is in it. We got rules and logs and all sorts of different things for how things are accessed and moved and modified and shared and different stuff like that. So we have a very good understanding of our data environment. That was a big change we made. And then looking at identity, we have a bunch of different alerts set up for identity now. We have even more now, but also looking at redundancy there. So we took this local admin password from the backup situation to a whole nother level. And like, where else would this be bad if my account wasn't available, if my admin account wasn't available, if the local admin wasn't available? So we've built in redundancies now where it might be, hey, we have 2 break glass accounts, and those 2 break glass accounts only have YubiKey MFA, because we don't want that tied to any person's phone number because they could leave and someone else comes in. So we have YubiKeys. Well, a YubiKey has a battery. It could die. Let's do 2 YubiKeys as backups to 2 break glass accounts, and each break glass accounts has 2 YubiKeys, and we have a password. And so let's keep one here and let's keep one somewhere else. So we've really thought about the resilience factor for a lot of our very critical systems and how things get accessed. We have alerting on that stuff to know it should never be touched unless it's an emergency. And if it is accessed, no matter when, we're going to get alerted on it. And we've done that with a lot of our accounts and a lot of our systems to really focus on that data, that identity level, to know what's going on there. So those have been the 2 big pillars that in probably the last almost 3 years now we've really focused on.
What about moving the, keys to the kingdom outside of the kingdom, such as like a password manager?
We did. We did.
Yeah.
We opted to not have it on a server anymore. Pros and cons on how you want to run your thing. There's benefits and cons to both, but we moved to a cloud system, and we feel much better about that. I'd rather be able to access our passwords than not. But yeah.
I was just going to say, give you a little bit of an anecdote, because we spoke to another person about also like a kind of a ransomware attack, where it was kind of interesting because they're like, oh, we'll just restore from backup, no problem. And then they go to their backups and they're all encrypted. They're like, oh, that's fine. We have Iron Mountain offsite backups. And they go to those, all encrypted as well. They're like, how? Like, then they started freaking out because like, how are our Iron Mountain backups all encrypted? And apparently what they were doing is like whatever system service that was sending the data to Iron Mountain, backups, was encrypting it. And then anytime they would fetch from it and do check, because they had systems to check, like, go do, is the last backup good? They would fetch it from there and then check it. So it would encrypt and decrypt in and out of the backup system. So you never know that the actual backups are fully encrypted.
Oh man, that's wild.
That's yeah. So it's like they get very crafty. So it's almost like, you always have to be on your toes with your assumptions.
I mean, that's something good to know, because as we get better, as we've seen, we've halved their payments in a year on what they make off the ransomware. And if that's just because of backups, they'll find a better way to attack backups. Like they'll shut that down so they can keep making their money. And I know backup companies are trying to innovate new ways around that. You can scan for ransomware. You can check this. And immutable is only so good. You might not be able to edit it, but you can still delete it. So like when people think they have immutable backups and they're really good, and it's like, oh yeah, until they just delete them. So, and then that's different. But some of the companies out there are starting to do like quotas that you have to have before you can delete, and you have to have multiple people approve a deletion. And we're trying to stay ahead of the threat actor by doing different features and sets. And so again, I say, at least keep your 3. That's the best rule. A couple on site and at least 1 off, and don't have it tied in any way whatsoever. And maybe even a different method of backing that data and pushing it out there. But really think about your backup resiliency strategy and how you're getting your data out there and getting it back and test it just restore every now and then and test that stuff. So many people back up and they've never tested a restoration. It's pretty crazy. We do ours quarterly from all of our backup locations, and just make a log, make a note whether it goes poorly or really well. We just follow along to make note. Other things around backups that we run into is just like, how fast can you back up everything? If you have 1,000 servers you got to restore because you've been ransomware, how long is that going to take you? You can only restore so many systems at one time. Like, what's that mean time to recovery? What do you have to recover in, and how fast? So really testing the bandwidth and the length of time for those backups is important as well, among other things. But yeah.
And I guess on the subject of just lateral movements and like privilege escalation, you mentioned there were like cache credentials. It's like how do you solve the credential sprawl? I guess in this case, if you're saying it was a cache, it's kind of like I'm assuming it wasn't just a TXT file on disk with like root password for this machine here, right? It was living in some layer of some subsystem. So how do you even tackle that?
Yeah.
And how do you know that's not happening right now?
How do I know it's not happening right? Is always a great question. It's hard to say in some of those instances. So we did movement around putting some policy, like group policy stuff, and some software technical controls around how credentials are saved on devices. And there are several servers and environments now where those credentials aren't allowed to be saved. I think there's also something around to be said about like just-in-time credentialing and PAM and PIM, depending on how you use it. So some of our systems now require that as well, where we're not doing a whole nother site, but we're having escalation of those current user credentials as you need, and that sends off alerts when they're used and justification why they have to happen. So we have a couple sets of eyes on that. But we also really looked at how those systems are accessed, and we think giving people maybe access to a password manager in general will help them keep from saving to the Chrome browser or to the local device or something. So a lot of our users now with escalated privileges or privileged accounts have access to a password manager where things are kept and stored. That password manager will also log you into the systems. It will it obfuscates the password. So a lot of our mid users, so like we have our global admins, then we have escalated privileged users, and then we have everybody else. These privileged users aren't going to see those passwords anymore. The password manager is logging them in. We've given them access to that. Password's filled in. It's obfuscated. They don't know what it is, so they're not saving it. It's just boom, logging them in and rocking and rolling. And then just telling these people up here at that global admin level, don't save stuff. Don't cache.
Yeah, makes sense. Actually, we're just approaching our time. Are you okay to go a little bit over? Or do you
Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah.
All right. Cool. So I guess kind of like if you had to build like a security program at a university or any kind of organization, really public or private, what are the first 3 things that you would do if you were building a new system from scratch?
Yeah, new system. So I built a system here from scratch, but if I'm starting over, it'll look a little bit different. I like to look at the top attack vectors for universities, which match the top attack vectors for a lot of industries. I mentioned email earlier. I think we're entering the realm where people used to say there's not a tech fix for a human problem. And I think we're getting to the point where there can be tech fixes for human problems. And I think email is the perfect example of that. There are some really, really great next generation AI enabled sort of email security platforms that really can keep you guys from getting a phishing email, from getting a BEC email. They're very, very, very good at keeping those emails out of inboxes. If we can get away from having to train users on phishing emails and doing campaigns, then 100% do it, because it doesn't matter how many times you run those campaigns. You got 100 users, you got 1,000 users, you got 10,000 users. Someone's clicking something. It happens every single time, and it only takes one person. So if we can get to the point where those emails aren't even in those inboxes, great. We're going to do that. So email for sure. Data governance. I'm going to throw ideally a DSPM and a DLP solution, but at least one or the other. But definitely probably a DSPM, just so I can start classifying my data, categorizing it, figuring out where it is, what it is, and putting some rules around that. 100%. One more. I don't know. We need good backups. Really good backups, right? But then in the book, I list a bunch of stuff at the end on if you are a first timer, either entering the industry or building your first security platform. I lay out a handful of the base level things that you probably should be doing, along with some stretch goals, if you will, if you got a little bit more budget. I think those three things are really super important. But being able to patch quickly and effectively is really good. You're going to want to be able to patch your systems. So do that, and maybe even a password manager, right?
Yeah, no, also like I would say, permissioning on whatever writes the backups to make sure the thing that writes the backups has no capability to delete the backups as well.
Absolutely.
It should be just a one-way flow.
Yeah, don't let that service account do more than that. And we're going off on all kinds of tangents, but even thinking about your service accounts, like they probably shouldn't have permission to log into devices, to go out to other systems. Like you need to really scope those down to least privilege on what they can do, what they can access, and they only should be writing, then they should only write to this site. They shouldn't be opening stuff or deleting stuff or doing different things. Like get some good controls over your service accounts and put some alerting around those too, because they seem to be compromised quite often.
Yeah, I think that's good advice, especially because the group we're talking about today, the LockBit, they did get a lot of them got arrested over the years, but I think in 2025 they started making a comeback, and now apparently they're releasing newer, more advanced versions of the ransomware software. So
yeah, we managed to, we being the collective we as in the United States of America, went after and managed to indict. We indicted a few members. We arrested a couple mid-tier and one upper tier guy. We indicted the founder, leader of them. They're all out of Russia. He's not coming to the States probably anytime soon. But we took down their website. They did regroup and to your point, come back, and they're not as prolific as they used to be. They're still operating. What we've seen more recently is them and 3 or 4 other groups that kind of got disrupted have banded together and sort of formed this ransomware cartel of groups, and they're trying to work together and pump out some new attack vector ransomware type stuff. But a lot of infighting there. A lot of the groups kind of butt heads. Whenever they're taken down, they just spin back up as another group we typically see. But a little bit of infighting there, so hopefully that keeps them distracted and not too efficient in the near future.
Yeah, we've spoken to another gentleman, I believe they were out of Israel, where it's the entry point is kind of not the entry point, but the compromise is similar. It's okay, we're in your system, but instead of just encrypting the data and asking for ransom, when the attackers is ideologically aligned, they're just we're just here to delete the data. We're here to cause maximum disruption. We don't want any money. There's no negotiation. It's just all your data is gone, all your backups is gone. We're not leaking it. It's just gone.
Yeah.
Right. And that's that is which is, I would say that's a way more difficult position to be in, because now there's not that you want to negotiate with them, but when someone is just out for blood, and you can't reason with someone who's just out for blood, with these guys, okay, everybody wants to make money, and this is a way to make money because everybody wants a nice boat and a nice car, a nice house, and that's a way to get it. And some people are cool with that.
Yeah.
But when you're just ideologically driven, it's a whole different beast.
Yeah. When looking at the nation states, Iran is very much destroy and not so much ransom. That's kind of been their MO lately. If you look at the other big players, North Korea, their entire economy essentially runs off of cryptocurrency that they've stolen from ransomware and different attacks. So that's how they fund their nuclear program and different weapons programs. China, very interested in intellectual property and research. They steal that as opposed to ransomwaring things. They're very much interested in stealing that and using it and developing it themselves cheaper without all the research back in. And then Russia, money motivated, some military secrets and research motivated, but primarily money, critical systems. They want to be in our environment watching us while we watch them, sort of thing. That's
Yeah, I guess just to wrap this up, if there was like one takeaway that you would love to leave in people's heads, especially CISOs on the front line or other tech leaders who are walking into a ransom incident or could potentially face a ransom incident at any given point, what would be like one piece of advice that you would want to give them?
I wrote the book primarily because I wanted to share my story. A lot of us in the industry don't talk about it, whether it's sort of this mark of shame. There's a weird stigma around sometimes sharing, that you've been compromised or breached. A little bit embarrassing. We don't like to discuss it. There's also sometimes some legal ramifications around it. I will say that, legal at your company doesn't want news to get out, or you're publicly traded. It could hurt the company. So we don't share. The threat actors talk about who they compromise and attacks at work, and we see them use the same sorts of attacks, and sometimes even go after the same companies, knowing that they pay ransoms or are easy targets. So I think it's really important for the industry as a whole to talk as much about their attacks as they can, and that's, again, why I wrote the book. I want to share my story to hopefully it helps someone else understand what a ransomware attack look like, what's an incident look like, what they're going to have to deal with. Understand that, hey, I got the okay to talk about it. You need to get the okay to talk about it too. Let's share how these guys are getting in, what's working, what's not working, how we're going to pivot, and maybe as a whole we can stop ransomware attacks from climbing year over year, and maybe get a little bit better at the cyber defense stuff that we're supposed to be pretty good at, right? So that's I would encourage you, share your stories if you can. And let's get better as an industry.
Yeah, I think that's really good point. CISOs don't get rewarded for nothing happens. You just do your job for 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 years with no incidents. No one pats you on the back.
Yeah.
You don't get a trophy for nothing happening. But when something bad happens, people might feel like they're going to take the blame, which is totally not fair. And I agree with you, should share all the experience, because that's the only way. That's our advantage as defenders, is to share in our knowledge and help each other defend, where attackers don't have that luxury of like a community, well, at least less so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's like much like in the aviation. The reason aviation is so safe these days because everything has been written in blood, right? Every single accident was a reason. Like, hey, let's figure out how this happened. What can we do to avoid this from happening? Create procedures, change technical guidelines, etc. And after over 100 years of people crashing into the ground and dying, we're here, and it's literally the safest way to travel. So yeah, I think there's a lot of lessons cybersecurity can take from aviation.
That's good.
Maybe not recently. Recently, it's been not great,
Well,
especially in the United States. To be fair, it's
one specific company. But yeah, that's a great analogy. Thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, and this has been excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah, pleasure speaking with you. Have a great rest of your day.